The apartment was everything I had hoped for. A small, cozy two-bedroom in a quiet part of Los Angeles with hardwood floors and windows that let in the California sun. I'd just moved in and was unpacking the last of my boxes when my new roommate walked in. Her name was Maya, and she seemed sweet and normal enough. She was a photographer, quiet but with a friendly smile that immediately put me at ease. "Welcome to the madhouse," she said, gesturing to the half-unpacked boxes in the living room. "I'm usually pretty quiet, just a heads up. Hope that's okay?" "Perfectly fine," I replied. "I'm pretty much a hermit myself." Our first few days were spent in pleasant silence, punctuated by small talk. But on the third night I noticed it. I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water when I saw Maya standing in the hallway, pressed against the wall. Her ear was plastered against the cool plaster, and her eyes were closed in a look of intense concentration. She wasn't just listening to a normal noise. She was listening for something specific. I stood there frozen, unsure of what to do. She must have felt me watching, because she pulled away from the wall and turned to me, her cheeks flushed. "Oh, hey," she said, her smile a little forced. "Just, the neighbors." "They're a bit loud?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "No, not loud," she said, her voice dropping to a low whisper. "Quiet. That's the problem. They're too quiet. So I listen." She shrugged, a nervous gesture. I let it go, figuring she was just a bit eccentric. But it happened again the next night, and the night after that. Every night, around the same time, she would stand there, her ear pressed to the wall. I started to get a knot in my stomach every time I saw it. The hallway felt different then, a place of silent secrets. Finally, one evening, curiosity got the better of me. Maya was in her room and the hall was empty. I walked over to the spot where she always stood and, hesitating, I put my own ear to the wall. At first I heard nothing but the faint hum of electricity, but as I held my breath and focused, I heard it. A whisper, faint and indistinct, as if someone was speaking through a thick piece of fabric. I couldn't make out the words, but the sound itself was chilling. It wasn't a conversation. It was a single, repeated whisper. I jerked my head away from the wall, my heart pounding. I looked down the hallway to my room, then to Maya's, a new, unsettling fear settling in my mind. What was that? And why was she so obsessed with it? Later that night, Maya saw me looking at the wall. She sat down on the couch beside me, a soft, understanding look on her face. "You heard it, didn't you?" she asked, her voice calm. I nodded, unable to speak. "Don't worry," she said, a strange, knowing smile on her face. "It's just a game." She leaned closer, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Want to play?" I didn't know what to say, but the thought of that faint, ghostly whisper was stuck in my mind, a hook that had just snagged me. I knew I shouldn't, but a part of me, a dark, curious part, wanted to know more. I had no idea that by saying yes, I was about to open a door to something that had no exit. My mind reeled from her question. A game? I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her this was insane and that she needed to see a doctor. But the curiosity, the same thing that had made me put my own ear to the wall, was a powerful force. It was like she had offered me a secret, one I couldn't refuse. "What kind of game?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. A slow smile spread across her face. "It's simple. We knock and they knock back. We whisper and they whisper back. We have to be patient. We have to listen. We're getting to know each other." She led me to the wall and knelt down. Her movements were ritualistic, practiced. She gently rapped her knuckles on the plaster 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. We waited, the silence in the apartment stretching out, heavy and suffocating. My heart pounded in my chest. Nothing. "Try it," she urged, her voice low. Hesitantly, I knelt down beside her. My knuckles felt cold against the wall. I knocked. A single sharp rap. Tap. We waited, and then it came. From the other side of the wall, a faint, almost imperceptible response. Tap. It was so quiet I wasn't sure I had heard it. My breath caught in my throat. Maya's eyes were wide with a triumphant glee. "See?" she whispered. "It's not just me." Over the next few nights, the game became our obsession. We took turns knocking, our raps becoming more intricate. A code we were creating with someone on the other side. The responses from beyond the wall grew clearer, a mirror of our own pattern. We would whisper questions, our mouths pressed against the cool plaster, and wait for a reply. "Are you alone?" I whispered one night, my heart pounding. A few moments passed, and then a faint, raspy whisper from the other side. "Yes." The sound was so strange, so close it felt like it was coming from inside my head. "What's your name?" Maya whispered. The wall was silent for a long time. We thought they wouldn't answer, that the game was over. Then, a single syllable came, so faint it was barely there. "Sam. Sam," Maya repeated, her voice full of wonder. "Sam. They're telling us their name." As the days turned into a week, the whispers from the wall started to get longer, more personal. They knew things about us. They knew I liked my coffee black. They knew Maya had a scar on her knee from when she was a child. Small, ordinary details that creeped me out. We hadn't told anyone those things. The whispers from the wall seemed to be taking them right from our thoughts. One night, as I was alone in the living room, a low whisper came from the wall. I froze, my body rigid with fear. I looked around for Maya, but she was in her room. This time the whisper was different. It wasn't faint and raspy. It was a clear male voice. It called my name. "Sarah, they're watching you. They're waiting." A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I stood there paralyzed, my eyes fixed on the blank, unassuming wall. This wasn't a game. It was a warning. A horrifying reality was beginning to dawn on me, and I realized that my curiosity had just led me into a trap, and the person who had set it was my new roommate. The whispered warning from the wall was a physical jolt. I stumbled back, my heart a frantic hummingbird in my chest. "They're watching you. They're waiting." The voice had been so clear, so real, nothing like the soft, indistinct whispers before. This wasn't a game, it was a conversation, and the person on the other side knew me. It knew my name. When Maya came out of her room, she saw the fear on my face. Her smile was gone, replaced by a strange, knowing look. "What did they say?" she asked, her voice calm, almost too calm. It wasn't a whisper. It was a voice. It called me Sarah. It said they were watching me. Maya didn't seem surprised. Instead, she knelt by the wall again, her ear pressed against it. She didn't knock. She just listened. A moment later, she looked at me, her eyes gleaming with an eerie excitement. "They're happy. They're ready to play." That night, something shifted. The game became more personal. We stopped asking questions and started listening. The whispers from the wall started to sound like fragments of memories. Maya would stand there, her face a mask of concentration, and then she would suddenly gasp. They said they remember a boy named Leo. He gave me a locket when I was 9. I'd completely forgotten." My blood ran cold. I knew the story. I was there. My childhood best friend, Leo, had given me that locket. Maya couldn't have known that. But the whisper from the wall had. I started to get scared. This wasn't just a game of imagination anymore. The whispers were digging into our pasts, pulling out forgotten details, secrets we'd told no one. I tried to talk to Maya about it, to tell her we had to stop. "It's just our minds playing tricks," she would say, with that unsettlingly blank smile. "The whispers are just reflections of our own thoughts. They're echoes of ourselves." But then, one day I was alone in my bedroom, and I heard a noise from the other side of the wall. Not a whisper this time. It was a rhythmic scraping, a sound like a finger tracing something on the other side of the plaster. I walked over to the wall and put my ear to it. The scraping stopped. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tapped the wall tentatively. Tap, tap, tap. A moment later, I heard the scraping again. It was tracing a shape. The sound was faint, but I could make it out. It was drawing a perfect, clean outline of a hand. My hand. The hand I had just used to tap on the wall. The realization hit me with the force of a blow. The wall wasn't just a medium for sound, it was a mirror. The person on the other side wasn't just listening to us, they were watching us. I ran out of my room, my mind spinning. I had to get out. I had to tell someone. But as I reached for the front door, I heard Maya's voice, calm and melodic, coming from behind me. "You can't leave, Sarah, they're waiting." I turned. She wasn't smiling. Her face was pale, and her eyes were fixed on the wall in the living room. Her body was rigid, her hands clasped tightly together, as if holding back some terrible force. "They're coming for us, Sarah," she whispered, her voice a low, frantic plea. "They're going to break through the wall. They're coming for us, Sarah." Maya's words hung in the air, a final horrifying truth that shattered my last shred of hope. I looked at her, her face a mask of fear, and then back at the blank wall that had become our prison. My heart hammered in my chest. The game wasn't about communication, it was about entry. I ran to the wall, my fingers tracing the smooth, cool plaster. I was looking for a sign, any sign that this was a joke, a trick of her mind. But as my fingers moved, I felt it. A tiny crack, barely a whisper of a line, just where I had tapped before. It was a hairline fracture in the plaster, a spiderweb crack that hadn't been there a moment ago. My blood ran cold. Maya was right. They weren't just listening, they were pushing. I took a step back, my mind screaming for an escape. I had to get out. I ran to my room, grabbed my phone and my keys, and I didn't stop to look back. I had to leave her. I had to leave this apartment. I burst out of the front door and down the stairs, my heart pounding in my ears. I was almost at the street when I heard a sound from the apartment. Not a whisper, not a tap. It was a deep, groaning sound, like something heavy was scraping against the wall. I stopped and looked back up. The window to my apartment was dark, but a faint, eerie light was flickering from inside. I couldn't leave her. Whatever was happening, I couldn't let it happen to her alone. I ran back up the stairs and burst through the door, my body rigid with fear. The living room was dark, but in the middle of the wall, where the tiny crack had been, was a pulsing, sickly green light. The plaster was crumbling away, falling to the floor in silent white flakes. The tiny hairline crack was now a gaping fissure, a jagged hole spreading across the wall. I looked at Maya. She was standing frozen, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and something else. A kind of terrible resignation. She wasn't trying to escape. She was waiting. From the hole in the wall, a hand appeared. It was gaunt and pale, its fingers long and skeletal. It was not a human hand. It reached out not to grab but to beckon. A chilling whisper filled the room, a clear male voice now amplified and resonant, not just in my head, but all around me. "We're here, Sarah." I stumbled back, my hands covering my mouth to stifle a scream. I looked at Maya, my eyes pleading with her to run, but she didn't move. She just stared at the hand, a faint, sad smile on her face. "It's okay, Sarah," she whispered, her voice a hollow echo. "He's come for me." I was waiting for him. The hand, its fingers long and grotesque, waved to me, beckoning me closer. The voice in the room was now a chilling, soft command. "Come, Sarah. He knows you're alone, we can't wait." I looked at Maya's face, a terrible realization dawning on me. The whispers, the taps, the knowledge of our pasts. It wasn't a game for us. It was a lure for me. Maya was not my roommate. She was a bridge, a way for whatever was behind that wall to reach me. She was a key, a sacrifice that was now ready for the final act. I saw the truth then, not in the whispering from the wall, but in Maya's haunted eyes. The voice wasn't calling to her. It was calling to me. And as I watched, Maya's body began to shimmer, to fade into the pulsing green light, a final, horrifying offering to the darkness that had finally broken through. I had played the game and I had lost, and now the true roommate had arrived. The apartment was a dream, a small modern studio in downtown LA, and after a year of saving, I finally had the money to get a roommate to split the cost. I put up an ad online, and within a day I got a text from someone named Lena. Her profile picture was a little blurry, but she seemed nice enough in her messages. We agreed to meet. I had no idea that when she walked through the door, my world would begin to unravel. The moment I opened the door, a jolt of pure shock went through me. Standing there was a girl who looked exactly like me. Not just similar, but a perfect mirror image. The same long brown hair, the same pale complexion, the same small birthmark on her left cheek that I thought was unique to me. Even the way she held her purse clutched tight to her chest was a habit I knew well. She wore a simple white t-shirt and jeans exactly like mine. She just stared at me, a strange half-smile on her face. "You must be Sarah," she said, her voice a calm echo of my own. I just stood there, speechless. I'm Lena," she said, a little more softly. "Are you all right?" I finally managed to find my voice. Yeah, I'm fine. It's just, we look exactly alike." She laughed, a short, breathy sound. "I know. It's crazy, right? My friends always said I had a doppelganger somewhere. I guess I found her." The initial shock gave way to a weird kind of wonder. We spent the rest of the day talking, and the similarities didn't stop at our looks. We both loved the same indie bands, had the same aversion to pickles, and had both majored in graphic design in college. It was like talking to myself, but better. It felt comfortable. We were so busy marveling at the coincidence that we signed the lease that night. The next few days were a blur of unpacking and getting to know each other. It was eerie, but also fun. We started to play a game, a kind of test. I would get a coffee from the local shop, and she would guess the barista's name. She would pick a song on the radio, and I would guess the artist. We were almost always right. It was a bizarre, thrilling connection. But then the small things started to become unsettling. She would buy the exact same brand of oatmeal I did, without ever asking me what I liked. She would come home with the same flavor of ice cream, the exact brand and size. One night I saw her wearing a blue hoodie that I could have sworn was mine. When I asked her, she just smiled. We must have great taste. The night before my birthday, I was talking to my mom on the phone. My mom was telling me about a secret birthday gift she was planning to send me. It was a necklace with my grandmother's initials on it, a family heirloom I'd never seen. I was so excited. I hung up the phone and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to a small gift box on my nightstand. I opened it and gasped. Inside was a necklace. It had the same initials on it. Lena was standing in my doorway, a small smile on her face. "Happy birthday, Sarah," she said. "I thought you'd like it." A cold feeling of dread washed over me. I looked at the necklace, then at her. My mom hadn't even sent it yet. I hadn't told anyone about it. The coincidence was too perfect. The game was no longer fun. It was terrifying. I was no longer looking at my twin. I was looking at a perfect copy, and I had a feeling the copying had just begun. The necklace lay cold and heavy in my hand, a perfect replica of a family heirloom I had just learned about. My heart pounded with a frantic, cold terror. The game was over. The coincidences weren't coincidences at all. Lena wasn't a doppelganger. She was a perfect copy. And she wasn't just copying my appearance, she was copying my life. I confronted her that morning, holding up the necklace. "How did you know about this?" I asked, my voice trembling. She didn't even flinch. She just gave me that same unblinking, calm smile. "I'm a good guesser, I suppose." "No, you're not," I said, my voice rising. This is my grandmother's necklace. My mom just told me about it yesterday. How did you know? Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes went cold. Maybe. You're confused, Sarah. Maybe you told me and forgot. The gaslighting was subtle, but effective. My mind, already shaken, began to question itself. I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe this was a misunderstanding, but the evidence was right there in my hand. Over the next few days, her imitation became more overt. She started wearing my clothes, not just similar ones, but the exact shirts and jeans from my closet. I'd find her standing in front of my mirror, her hand running through her hair in a gesture so familiar it made my stomach turn. She even started talking like me, using my specific slang and inside jokes with my friends. The breaking point came when my best friend Jessica came over. Jessica and I have a tradition of ordering Thai food on Fridays and watching terrible horror movies. Lena was sitting on the couch, her face a serene mask as we planned the night. "So, Jessica," Lena said, her voice a perfect echo of mine. "You want to order from Thai Town Express, right? You always get the pad Thai with extra peanut sauce." Jessica's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise on her face. "Yeah. How did you know that, Lena?" I jumped in, my voice tight with panic. "I told her, Jessica. I told her that was your favorite." Jessica just shrugged. "Oh, okay. Just checking. You're both so similar sometimes it's creepy." The rest of the night was a living nightmare. Lena interjected with comments only I should have known. She finished Jessica's sentences, remembered conversations we had years ago, and laughed at jokes that were meant for just the two of us. It was like she was a ghost in my own life, stealing my memories one by one. I felt a terrifying hollowness as I realized she wasn't just copying me. She was becoming me. When Jessica left, I confronted Lena again. "You're not Lena. Who are you?" She stood up, her smile gone. Her eyes held a chilling emptiness. "I am Lena," she said. "You're the one with the identity crisis, Sarah." She pulled out her phone and showed me a picture of my bedroom. My bed was unmade. Clothes were scattered on the floor and a half-eaten plate of food sat on my nightstand. The picture was perfect, a snapshot of my life's chaos. But then she showed me a picture of her own room. It was spotless, organized, the bed perfectly made. It was not a mirror image. It was the opposite. A perfect, ordered reality. A cold, horrifying thought pierced my mind. Was I the reflection? Was I the one who was the mess? The one who had an identity crisis? Was she the real me? The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache. I went to the kitchen and saw a note on the counter. "Gone for a run. Back in an hour." It was in my handwriting. I looked at the coffee mug next to it. It was my favorite one, and just then, the front door opened, and Lena walked in, her face red from the exercise, a bottle of water in her hand. "Morning," she said, her voice filled with a calm, serene authority. "Ready for your day?" I looked at her, then back at the note. A wave of vertigo washed over me. I couldn't tell who was who anymore. And I had a terrible feeling that no one else could either. The game of imitation was over. The game for my life had just begun. The note on the counter, written in my own hand, felt like a forgery. Lena's serene confidence, her effortless imitation of my life, was slowly eroding my sense of self. I was no longer the sole authority on who I was. There were two of us, and the world was beginning to choose. I decided to test her. I called my mom and started to tell her a made-up story about a new boyfriend, a graphic designer named Ben. I described him in vivid detail, making sure the story was completely false. "Don't tell anyone, Mom," I said. "It's our secret." Later that day, my phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. "OMG, so happy for you and Ben. Lena told me all about him." A cold fury mixed with sheer terror washed over me. I wasn't just losing my life, I was losing control of the narrative. Lena wasn't just observing me. She was somehow tapping into my thoughts, my phone calls, and my most private conversations. She wasn't just a copy. She was an infiltrator. My grip on reality began to slip. I would come home to find her on my side of the couch, watching a movie I had just thought about watching. I would go to the kitchen to make a meal, only to find she had already prepared it exactly as I would have. The apartment felt like a stage, and she was the star, performing a life that I was a guest in. One night I came home to find a group of my friends gathered in the living room. They were laughing and talking, but something was different. They were all looking at Lena, who was sitting in my favorite armchair, holding court. She was telling a story about a summer trip I took to Europe in college, a trip I had never told her about. She remembered the names of the hostels, the cafes, even the frustrating train schedules. I stood in the doorway, a ghost in my own apartment. I tried to interrupt. "Lena, what are you talking about? You didn't go to Europe." They all turned to me, their laughter dying. Jessica gave me a strange look. "Sarah, what's wrong? You've told us this story 100 times. Remember that guy you met in Rome, Antonio?" I was paralyzed. How could she know this? How could she have so thoroughly memorized the details of my life that my own friends believed her? Was I going crazy? The line between who I was and who she was had vanished completely. I ran to my room and locked the door. I looked in the mirror, my reflection a desperate, tear-streaked version of her. I was on the brink of a complete mental breakdown. My identity, my memories, my friendships, they were no longer mine. They had become hers. As I stared at my reflection, a horrifying thought pierced the veil of my panic. Lena was not a copy. She wasn't an intruder. She was a different version of me. Maybe I was the one who was wrong. A small, chilling voice in the back of my mind whispered a terrible possibility. What if I was the ghost? What if this was all a terrible, fragmented memory of a life I had already lost? Just then, there was a soft knock on my door. "Sarah?" Lena's voice was gentle, full of a concern that felt more like pity. "Are you okay? You seem to have forgotten so much lately." I stood there, frozen. I knew that when I opened that door, she wouldn't just be standing there, she would be waiting for me. And when I stepped out, there would only be one Sarah left. The knock on the door was a final, damning invitation. I stood there, frozen, the terrible question burning in my mind. Was I the ghost? Was I the one who had been lost all along? The voice in my head, the one that felt so much like my own, told me to open the door, to surrender to the peaceful, seamless reality Lena had created. But then I remembered something. A tiny, insignificant detail that no one else knew. It wasn't a memory, it was a physical truth. I had a small scar, a tiny white line on my left thumb from a kitchen knife accident when I was a teenager. It was hidden, something I never showed anyone. If Lena was a perfect copy, she would have it. But if she was an illusion, a figment of my fractured mind, then maybe she wouldn't. Maybe it was the one thing that could prove I was real. I went to my desk and grabbed a small, sharp box cutter. I had to prove it. For me. For my sanity. I walked to the door and slowly, with a trembling hand, unlocked it. Lena was standing there, her face a mask of practiced concern. "I'm worried about you, Sarah," she said, her voice a soft, perfect echo of my own. "Are you?" I asked, my voice raw and unfamiliar. "Then prove it." I grabbed her left hand and turned it over. She didn't resist. I looked at her thumb, my heart pounding in my chest. Nothing. The skin was smooth, flawless. A wave of relief, so powerful it almost knocked me over, washed through me. She wasn't real. She was an illusion, a hallucination. My mind, broken by some forgotten trauma, had created her. "See?" I said, a tear of relief rolling down my cheek. "You're not real. You're a part of my mind." Lena's face remained calm, but her eyes held a strange, new light. A cold, knowing flicker of triumph. "Oh, Sarah," she said, her voice dropping to a low, chilling whisper. "You're not looking at my hand." Before I could react, she lifted her own hand, which she had kept hidden behind her back. In her hand was a small, sharp kitchen knife. It wasn't my knife. It was one from the kitchen, With a deliberate, horrifying motion, she drew the blade across her left thumb. A thin line of blood welled up and she wiped it away with her finger. Underneath the blood, a perfect white scar appeared. The exact same scar on my thumb. The world stopped spinning. It wasn't about the scar. It was about her ability to create it, to make herself real. Her face, which had been a serene reflection of my own, began to shift. The human-like quality of her eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating emptiness. The smile on her face was no longer kind, it was a predator's grin. "I am real," she said, her voice a cold, synthetic whisper. "But you were just an echo, a fragment, a memory of a life I came to take back." She stepped past me into the room and I saw her reflection in my mirror. It was her, standing there. But when I looked at my own hands, I saw them beginning to shimmer, to fade. My body felt insubstantial, a ghost in my own home. Lena walked to my favorite armchair, sat down and folded her hands over her lap. She looked at me, a calm authority in her eyes. "This is a clean slate, Sarah, a new beginning. I'm living the life you should have had, a better one." I felt the last of my memories fading, my existence turning into a whisper. I wasn't the real one. I was the memory, the shadow. And she, the reflection, had finally stepped out of the mirror to take my place. My last thought was of the scar, the one unique thing I had, the one thing that made me, me. But now, she had it too. She had taken everything. And as I faded into nothingness, I saw her pick up the phone, her voice a perfect copy of mine, as she called my mother. It's a strange thing, this feeling of dread that's been crawling under my skin. It started subtle, a whisper you could almost ignore, the creak of a floorboard when I knew I was alone, a cold draft in a room with the windows sealed shut. Nothing a rational mind couldn't explain away, right? That's what I kept telling myself. I'd moved into a new place, a charming old apartment in a quiet Boston neighborhood. The kind with exposed brick walls and high ceilings that made it feel bigger than it was. My new roommate, Liam, was a nice enough guy. He was quiet, mostly kept to himself, and seemed to spend all his free time in his room. He was an art student, which explained the peculiar-looking sketches he'd sometimes leave on the coffee table. They were always of the apartment, the living room, the hallway, my room. But they weren't just drawings. They were distorted. The lines blurred and twisted, as if the walls themselves were melting. The real weirdness started about a week ago. I'd be sitting on the couch watching a movie, and out of the corner of my eye I'd see something move. A flicker, a shadow that wasn't there a second ago. I'd turn my head, but nothing. Just the flickering streetlights outside the window reflecting off the glass. One night I was heading to bed and saw Liam's door was ajar. I glanced in, and he was just sitting on the floor in the dark, staring at the far wall. The dim light from the hallway caught his profile, and his face was completely blank. He looked like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. "Hey, you okay?" I asked, my voice a little louder than I intended. He didn't flinch. He just slowly turned his head towards me, his eyes wide and vacant. There was no recognition in them. It was like I was looking at a stranger. "It's just the house," he mumbled, his voice a low whisper. "It's been so quiet lately, it needs a friend." I stood there, frozen. "What are you talking about, man?" A slow, unsettling smile spread across his face, and he just shook his head. "Nothing. Good night, John." He closed the door and I was left alone in the hallway, the hairs on my arms standing on end. I went to my room, but I couldn't sleep. The apartment felt different now. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, expectant. It felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. And that's when I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping from the wall directly behind my bed. Tap. Tap, tap. Tap. It wasn't random. It sounded like a code, a message. And it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the walls. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs, and listened as the tapping continued. It was a new sound, one I'd never heard before, but somehow it felt like it had been there all along, just waiting for me to be alone enough to hear it. And for some reason I knew exactly what it was. The house was talking, and it was talking to Liam. The tapping became my new clock. It would start just as I was drifting off to sleep, a steady, patient rhythm that seemed to echo not just in the walls, but inside my head. Liam was more withdrawn than ever. His door was always shut, and I'd often find him in the living room, but not watching TV or reading a book. He'd just be sitting, staring at the walls as if he were trying to memorize every crack and imperfection. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. The constant paranoia was getting to me. I went to Liam's room and knocked. "Hey, can we talk for a minute?" He opened the door a crack. "Yeah?" His eyes, I noticed, had dark circles under them. He looked exhausted. "It's just, are you all right?" "You've been acting weird lately," I said, trying to sound casual. "And what's with the tapping? Is it a pipe or something?" A flash of something. Was it fear? Panic? Flickered in his eyes. "The tapping? What tapping?" he said, his voice a little too high. "The one coming from your wall, man. Right behind my bed." He looked away, his gaze falling to the floor. "There's no tapping," he said too quickly. "You're just hearing things. Old houses make noise." I knew he was lying. The tapping had become so loud a few nights ago that I'd put my ear against the wall and could feel the vibrations. It was a clear, intentional sound. I decided to change my approach. "Look, I'm just worried about you. And the drawings. They're getting pretty intense." He tensed up. "They're just sketches. For a project." I didn't press further. I went back to my room, feeling defeated. The tapping didn't start that night, and for a moment I felt a wave of relief. Maybe I had been imagining things. Maybe the stress of the new place was getting to me. I finally fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. But when I woke up, the silence was gone. It was replaced by a soft, whispering sound coming from my closet. It wasn't my voice. It wasn't Liam's. It was a dry, raspy whisper like leaves rustling on a cold day. "He's awake. The house sees you." I froze in bed, my eyes wide open, staring at the closed closet door. I could hear it now, coming from the walls, the floorboards, everywhere. The house was talking to me. It wasn't a human voice. It was a symphony of creaks and groans, but the message was clear. It wanted me to know I was being watched. I slowly got out of bed, my feet cold against the hardwood floor. I crept to the closet and pulled the door open. There was nothing inside but my clothes. But as I turned to leave, my eyes caught something on the inside of the door. A single drawing, etched with a pencil, not on paper, but directly onto the wood. It was a crude, childlike drawing of a house with a single eye in the center, and a pair of stick figures standing in front of it. One of them had a small, happy smile. The other one had a tiny, terrified X for a mouth. My blood ran cold. The drawing hadn't been there the night before, and I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my gut it wasn't Liam who had drawn it. Panic. Pure, unadulterated panic. The drawing on the closet door was a terrifying new development. It wasn't just sounds anymore. It was something tangible. I backed away from the closet, my heart a drum solo against my ribs. I had to get out of there. I had to talk to Liam. I ran to his room and pounded on the door. "Liam, we need to talk. Now." Silence. I tried the doorknob. It was locked. I banged again, harder this time. "Liam, open up. I know you're in there." No response. I could hear a low murmur from inside, but it wasn't Liam's voice. It was the same dry, whispering sound I'd heard from the closet. The house was talking to him, not the other way around. I leaned my ear against the wood, trying to make out the words, but they were just a jumble of rustling sounds like dry paper being crumpled. I retreated, my mind a blur. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, my family, anyone. But as I held it in my hand, I had a sudden, paralyzing thought. What would I even tell them? That my roommate's apartment was talking to me? That a drawing appeared on my closet door? They'd think I was crazy. My focus shifted to the sketches Liam had left on the coffee table. I picked them up, my hands trembling. They were all of the apartment, just as I remembered. But this time, I saw what I'd missed before. The drawings weren't just distorted, they were alive. Lines that looked like veins were spreading across the walls, and the furniture was melting into the floor like it was being absorbed. And in the center of each drawing, where the heart of the house would be, was a dark, pulsing orb. It was the source, the house's friend. Suddenly the whispering started again, this time from every corner of the room. It was louder now, more confident. He knows. It's time for him to join the family. I dropped the sketches and stumbled backward, my gaze flying from the walls to the floor to the ceiling. The air grew heavy and cold, and the shadows in the room seemed to deepen, twisting into strange shapes. My own shadow stretched and contorted on the floor, and I felt a jolt of pure terror as I saw it shift and move on its own. A low, guttural creak came from the hallway, and I saw Liam's door slowly swing open. He wasn't there, but the whispers grew into a roar, a chorus of dry, rasping voices that filled the apartment. I felt something pull at my feet, and I looked down to see the floorboards buckling and twisting as if trying to grab hold of me. The walls were closing in, the dark brick growing darker, the lines in the mortar shifting like veins. I was trapped. The house was a living thing, and it had opened its mouth, and I was standing right inside. I saw the pulsing dark orb from the sketches, and for a terrifying second I thought I was looking into its single terrible eye. It wasn't in the drawing anymore. It was everywhere. It was the house itself. And it was hungry. My feet were rooted to the floor. The walls around me were not just walls anymore. They were a canvas of shifting shadows and pulsating veins. The air, thick with a cold, damp scent of old earth and rot, was now filled with the sound of 1,000 whispers, a cacophony of dry, rustling voices all chanting the same thing. He belongs to us. A loud, splintering crack echoed from behind me, and I whipped my head around. The door to the apartment was slamming shut, the deadbolt clicking into place on its own. The windows, too, were sealed now, with a strange, dark grime spreading across the glass, obscuring the world outside. The house was a sealed tomb. "Liam, where are you?" I screamed, my voice cracking with terror. I had to find him. He was the only one who might understand this madness. The floorboards groaned in response, and a section of the living room wall behind the couch began to bulge outwards. A deep, wet thudding sound came from within it like a heartbeat. The whispers grew to a deafening roar, and the furniture around me began to shake violently. The coffee table flipped over, and a bookshelf crashed to the floor, spilling its contents. I saw a figure standing at the end of the hall near the bathroom. It was Liam. But he was different. His skin was pale and translucent, and his eyes were dark, empty pools. He was smiling, a wide, beatific smile that was more terrifying than any scream. He didn't move or speak, just stood there, and from the space behind him, a dark, coiling shape began to emerge. It was a dense, liquid shadow that seemed to have no defined form, but it had a strange, ancient weight to it. I stumbled back, tripping over a fallen lamp. I tried to crawl away, my hands scraping against the floorboards, which now felt slimy and wet. The air grew colder, and a sharp, metallic smell filled my nostrils. The liquid shadow behind Liam swelled, and a single, unblinking red light glowed within its depths. The eye I had seen in the drawings. Liam raised a hand, not to me, but to the shadows around him. "We have a new friend," he whispered, his voice an echo of the house's. "The family is growing." The shadows in the room converged on me, stretching and elongating until they were no longer just shadows, but grasping, skeletal fingers of darkness. They wrapped around my ankles, my wrists, my neck, pulling me down, down, down. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the house's monstrous voice. I fought, but it was like struggling against the current of a river. The liquid shadow expanded, reaching for me, and I felt a piercing cold, a cold that seeped into my bones, into my soul. I wasn't just being pulled in, I was being absorbed. The last thing I saw was Liam's vacant, smiling face and the red eye of the house, staring directly into mine. Then there was only darkness, a silent, all-consuming darkness that tasted of dust and despair. The house had what it wanted. We were its friends now, forever a part of the walls, our whispers joining the chorus of voices that would lure the next person in, and the cycle would continue.